Hi everyone, I'm Aideen T. Finnola. I'm a Martha Beck trained life coach, a public speaker, and an author of my memoir, which is entitled My Exquisite Purple Life: Insights from a Woman Who Never Should Have Made It, But Did. Thank you so much for joining me for another segment of my video blog, and today I want to talk about the inner critic. I want to talk about what the inner critic is, why we have an inner critic, and what we can do about it. So first of all, what is the inner critic? And I think most of us are pretty familiar with what the inner or the dynamic of the inner. We know that experience, right? But just to define it, the inner critic is a virtual character inside your head that ceaselessly, vigilantly, unfailingly passes fear-based, merciless fear-based judgment on every single one of your thoughts, your words, your actions, your feelings, your impulses, and your physical appearance and your performance. So basically, it's not your BFF, right? This is not a fun thing. So how did we end up with an inner critic, or why do we have an inner critic? Well, in my memoir, I devoted an entire chapter to talking about the inner critic because it's been something that I have wrestled with really a lot in my life. And the title of that chapter is The Aftermarket Add-on. And the reason why I call it the aftermarket add-on is because nobody is born with an inner critic. We are all born in a state of bliss. No baby is born with the understanding or the assumption that it has to do anything or become someone according to someone else's idea in order to gain value and worth. Every single one of us, when we were born, we knew that we were just fine. We knew there wasn't anything wrong with us, and we didn't think there was anything wrong with us. So how did we get from that state of original perfection that we were born into to where so many of us are today, where we find so much fault with ourselves, and inside our head there is just this constant dialogue, this constant litany of our faults and our failings and our shortcomings and everything that's wrong with us, right? And it's very painful. Tell me where I'm wrong. I mean, it's nasty. So how do we get there? So the thing is that we're humans, and we have this higher order thinking part of ourselves, yet we're also animals. And in nature, when an animal finds fault with its offspring, what it does in nature is it rejects the offspring, and or it abandons it, kicks it out of the nest, whatever, depending upon the species, however they handle it. But what it ultimately means for that offspring is it means death. And that dynamic is still going on inside of us. Even though we don't always think of ourselves as animals, we do have that primitive brain. And our primitive brain reacts that way when we experience disapproval from our parents, which I don't know anybody who's made it to adulthood without having experienced a certain degree of disapproval from their parents. I know I experienced just an avalanche of disapproval and criticism from my parents. They were very abusive. They raised me in a religious cult. And so there was constant disapproval, which my primitive brain would have interpreted as, oh no, this means I'm going to die. They're disapproving of me. That means I'm going to be left out in the cold and I'm going to die. And so in order to try and combat that, my brain, anytime I would do something wrong and they would find fault with me, my brain would make a mental note of that. I spilled my orange juice and my mother lost her mind. Do not spill my orange juice again. And then what your brain starts to do is it says, okay, well, if spilling my orange juice caused that problem, then probably spilling anything is going to cause that problem. And what we start to do is to try to figure out, well, what else could possibly create this experience that we interpret as a death threat, right? That we're going to die. When you go through those mental gymnastics over and over and over again, eventually you're going to end up with an inner critic. Eventually you will end up with this this dictator inside your head, this babysitter, this character that is, it's well-meaning, right? It is really actually trying to save your life. but it doesn't, it's so misguided because it's actually terrorizing you, and it actually creates a really horrible experience for you in your life. So what can we do about our inner critic? Well, the first step that you need to take in order to start to manage your inner critic is to understand that it's not you. This is not coming from your authentic self. That authentic self that was there in an uncorrupted state when you were a brand new baby, and when you were born into that state of original perfection, you didn't have this, and it came from outside of you. So if it comes from outside of you, you can also put it back outside of you. And one of the ways to do that is to start to talk back to your inner critic. If you think about the things that your inner critic says to you, how would you respond if you heard those comments said to someone that you loved? I know myself as a mother of 2 daughters. If I were to hear someone to speak to one of my daughters the way that my inner critic used to speak to me, I would have been furious. I would have been so angry, and I would have defended them, and I would have aggressively come after whoever that was who said those horrible things. And I have a right to be protected and defended myself in that same way, with that same kind of indignation and being offended, and that same sense of this is not right and this is not okay. And so when my inner critic tries to say negative things to me, that's how I respond. I get very, very offended. Who are you? How dare you say those things about me? You don't know me. You can't know me, because that's not who I am. So anyway, that's just a little bit of an exercise, a little bit of an understanding with the inner critic, and it all comes down to thought work. And if you're interested in taking a closer look at all of that stuff that's going on inside of your head, I encourage you to go over to my website. First of all, I have a whole collection of free resources that'll give you a bunch of little different exercises. I've got some positive affirmations over there. I've got some recorded affirmations and mantras. I've also got a couple of coaching tools that will help you to get connected with your inner critic, or I'm sorry, connected with your authentic self and with your intuition, which will then help you to combat your inner critic. If you want to go a step deeper, I also have a program called Reclaiming Your Mind, one practical step at a time. And I go in depth in that program on really lots and lots of ways to handle your inner critic. There's an exercise in there where you will get a chance to talk back to your inner critic. You'll get a chance to identify the messages of your inner critic, because sometimes those messages are just going and going and going, and we're so used to them that we just don't even pay attention. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope you take on your inner critic, because that inner critic has no business saying the stuff it says about you. And I don't even know what it says about you, and I'm telling you, I disagree with it. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.